Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar, which today is coming from Kier Construction, the title of which is Digital Twins, Elevate Productivity, Efficiency and Experience Using Your Data Better. So I'm Matt Seeks, I'm the editor of the Health Estate Journal. Today we're going to be hearing about how Kier Construction, together with the Royal United Hospitals Bath NHS Foundation Trust, are using digital twinning technology to better understand and manage buildings, helping staff work more efficiently and creating a smoother, safer, and more comfortable experience for patients. Our speakers today are Matt Griffiths, who is the Health Sector Director at Kier Construction. We also have James Franklin, he's Digital Twin Project Director at Kier. And we also have Neil Flint, who is Associate Director of Estates at Royal University Hospitals Bath NHS Foundation Trust. So welcome to them. There will be a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions at all for our speakers, do please pop those into the questions box. And to kick things off then, we have a poll to gauge understanding of digital twins in healthcare. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So my name's Matt, been introduced by Matt. Thank you very much for that introduction, Matt, and thank you for those who just contributed to that poll. It was really helpful to just gauge and understand. We wanted to make sure we pitched this at the right level, who had understanding and who didn't. So that was really helpful to see. So I'm going to go over onto the slides now and we'll get started. Okay. So digital twins in healthcare. I think probably the first thing I'd be asking if I was seeing this is, why is a traditionally main contractor talking about digital twins? And so I thought I'd explain that first before we got into it. So obviously Kier Construction, large construction company. For my role, I work purely in the health sector. So me and my team look after all of our healthcare work, of which is billions of pounds over 20 years of doing healthcare. And in the main contracting role, you often find yourself as the centre of the stakeholders. So in a design sense, it's bringing together the client brief, what the design team need, what costs are, neighbours, stakeholders, etc. So you find yourselves in the centrepiece of many of those decisions, and that's through design and build. So you'll hear from my colleague James later on, who leads our digital twin team. And James, through previous roles in Kier, was that centrepiece for Kier across other sectors. And so over time, we've grown into this position of continuing that place into the outcomes stage of the project. So a digital twin very much needs the same skill sets that are needed in main contracting. That's collaboration, bringing people together, integration of data and people, and ultimately producing something that makes a difference to the end users. So lots of similarities in skill sets between main contracting and creation of a digital twin. So thought we'd start with what is a digital twin, and they'll do this deliberately because I think there's quite a lot of misconceptions around it and also a lot of labels, and I've put some of those there. I think simply the way I describe it is a digital twin enables a smart building. And in the NHS sector, a smart building is an intelligent hospital or intelligent healthcare building. So very simply, that is the definition. But then what I'd like to go into is what it isn't, because I think even in my own business and even in my own team, sometimes there's some confusion around what it is and what it isn't. So I thought I'd address that first to really set the scene. So what is it not? It is not about making a more and more and more detailed model. And I think this is probably the most common misconception. People come to me and say, "Oh, it's a digital twin because we modelled every screw through the wall." That's not the case. It's not about a more and more detailed model. I'll talk about what it is about in a minute. It's not about visually twinning. It's nice to have a visual twin so you can overlay a 360 scan of the building in reality to the model. That's not the main purpose of the twin. And maybe controversially, it's not really a twin. I mean, I don't know if any of you are twins, but if you have a twin, when you lift your right arm up, does your twin lift their right arm up? They don't, do they? Your twin is something that looks the same. A digital twin is really a mirror. So it's mirroring the reality of what's happening in that building in the digital reality. So it's mirroring that rather than twinning it confusingly. And it's also, some of you may have clinical colleagues or may be clinical. There is not a clinical digital twin. So a clinical digital twin might be modeling a heart, for example, and doing some tests on different ways of doing surgery on a heart or testing a different drug on a person. That's not what a healthcare digital twin is. A healthcare is around the building itself, the sensors, the data, and all the things that are happening in that building, with the primary goal of making the operation and patient experience better. So another confusing comparison in the NHS sector, not a clinical twin. So what is it? It's about reflecting real life data in a digital space. It is linking that data together and being able to interpret it and use it in more effective and intelligent ways. And so by mirroring life digitally, it gives you the ability to do things quicker, better, and faster. And I've got a very simple example here of 10 years ago, if you forgot to shut your window on your car, you'd only really realize it if you had to walk back to your car and the rain had gone in. Nowadays, your phone will tell you if you've left the window open, and it's much quicker to just press the button, shut the windows on the car, rather than going back to it. So that's a very simple example of linking reality with the digital. And then you can layer those things up. So you can layer data together, which gives you the additional performance requirements. So the examples, some of you might have Google Home. So, you can do things like, if I come in, turn the lights on. So it's that ability to have overlay and layering of data, which I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail in a minute. Or straight away. So this is an example of my house, which I thought might be easy for people to get their head around it. So at my house, I have various different smart assets. So I've got a doorbell with a camera on it, got lots of Google Home speakers, got high thermostats and smart plugs, smart lights, a cat flap that tells me when the cat comes in, and a backdoor camera, which is a different brand to Google. Now, currently, I get on all those different apps. So if I want to see the doorbell, go onto the Google. Want to see my back door, go onto Earthy app. So that's lots of smart assets. They sort of start to link together. So through the Google Home app, you can see plugs and lights, but it doesn't have everything on it. So it's siloed information. So I have lots of different things to access the smart elements of my house. And I'd argue this is quite similar to what a lot of traditional buildings are now when they're handed over. So if I was going to create a digital twin at home, it would be the same products, same things in the house, but it would be all accessible via one platform. So there'd be one app called Digital Twin app. I'd click on that and it would showcase my house, the model of my house. When the cat came in and the cat flap went off, the cat flap would be seen to go off, and I'd have some dashboards and I'd be able to see and analyze a lot easier. So in very simple terms, that is a difference between smart assets and a digital twin using the house as an example. So we're going to talk more about the Dyson Cancer Centre later with RUH, but I'll use it as an example of then how to compare a digital twin to smart assets. So we handed over this building in 2024, and on the left is a screenshot of the model, and on the right is a photograph of the building. So the things we handed over was a federated model, the O&M information, the drawings, asset data, and then on the right-hand side is how the building is performing. So it has a CAFM system, it has a BMS, it's all the things that are happening in real life. And the only tangible link between the realities of that building in operation and the model that we handed over is the QR codes we installed. So there's QR codes for asset tagging. So you could go scan a QR code and it would take you to that air handling unit, for example. There is no physical digital link between, for example, the BMS. So the BMS is in its own ecosystem. It's got a log into it and it sits in reality, and that doesn't link across the model. So this is an example of what we aspire digital twin to be. This is not necessarily everything we're doing with IUH. We'll explain later, but this would how it could be if it did have a digital twin platform to it. So same stuff on the left, the model, own information, etc. And on the right, you've got all the systems in reality. Now, through the platform, you would be able to log into that and they would intrinsically talk to each other. So when you can see the CAFM and a ticket was raised on the CAFM, that would also show where that is on the model. Or if the BMS was saying, there's an error in one of the rooms, that would be reflected in the model as well. So it's that two-way link, shows how it goes from smart assets to digital twin. So to use another medical analogy, the skeleton is the foundations of the digital twin. So it's geometry, and that can be simple or complicated, and I'll explain a bit more in a minute. But it can be very simple, spatial. The nervous system is the sensors, so that's the real-time connectivity. That's the things that are happening in that building that keep it going. And then the brain is the really clever bit, and it's the analytics. So what do we do with that information? And it's starting to use that data to do predictive things. So like I said, you could say if somebody comes into a house to turn the lights on, in a very simple example, but in a healthcare facility, there's an endless possibility of things that you can link together to do that analytics. So the other point to make is they really can be on a scale. I think it's important for this conversation that they can start very simple and then they can become very complicated. And there's a couple of examples here of where this has been done in the past. So there's an example online of Milton Keynes, a very simple digital twin where they had a 2D plan on a screen in a department, and it was tracking some of the key equipment in there. So that if the staff had lost the hoist, they go to the screen, it's in room 4, they go and get the hoist, instead of having to look around for it. So that is a digital twin. That's linking that the reality of that piece of equipment with a digital space, but it was in a 2D drawing. And then you've got examples of Manchester University where they've done it across their estates, looking at space optimization. So looking at how many people use rooms and how frequently. So you can see the sliding scale goes all the way to NHP, which is proposing almost every possible system you can have interconnected to really get maximize that data, all the way for things like asset tagging linen, for example, to make sure that you know how much you've got at any point. So all of those are digital twins. They're just on a scale. And so what you can do is go from descriptive, which is just what's going on right now, which is the Milton Keynes example, where's my hoist, to predictive, which is so I know where it typically is, so therefore I can predict. Best examples in maintenance, if you've got sensors on your filter system, for example, in AHUs, you can predict when you need to change the filter rather than keep having to check it. And then prescriptive would be, well, what do we do with that information? It's the AI element of, so I know all this stuff is happening, so what should I change? Then I thought it's quite important to address historic concerns that I think traditionally the NHS has had around data, licenses, and software. So I think it's fair to say historically the NHS has ended up tied into systems. So it's only very recently that interoperability and transparency has become so open. In the past, things were very much locked in. You buy my thing, and then you siloed a data set. And I'm sure you've all got examples of that having happened. The med tech market is massive. There's lots and lots of different products and things that can all come and offer very similar functionality. And the data and each of these things are great in their own right. The future is, though, how do they talk to each other and how can that data be yours and you use that for your purposes? So now the status quo is nothing goes past without these points. So fully interoperable, completely transparent software agreements, data owned and kept by the NHS, ability to scale, so start small, bolt on modules as needed, compliance, cybersecurity, and accountability. And so I've borrowed some of these slides from an NHS presentation. So I think this is exactly what what should be explained. So some of you may recognise this. So in the past, it was lots of different systems, didn't really fit together, didn't really talk to each other. So that jigsaw. What it needs to be is best-in-class agnostic solutions that fit perfectly together, talk to each other, but very importantly, they're not all the same provider. So the bottom one there is you don't want someone to sort of own the whole market, and then actually there's a gap in it. It's something they don't do, and therefore you're locked out from the ability to do it. So very much all of our approach to digital twins, everything that James has been doing with the RUH is around those principles and trying to be the top right picture. And this again is an NHS slide about intelligent hospitals. It just shows the principles that are baked into it. So ownership of data, ethics, security, resilience, scalability. These are the principles of however you have to address this market. Now, things don't pass go unless they go through here. And then, so how does this align to the broader policy around the NHS and the priorities around it? So, analog to digital, you will have heard a lot about one of the big key 3 shifts. Hospitals and community, another one of the 3 key shifts. I'll list them out and then I'll explain them. Productivity, net zero NHS, patient safety, workforce. So arguably there's probably not many bigger things than those 6 topics you could say there. So how analog to digital obviously is quite a clear one. We're going to a digital space with digital twins. It's changing from a passive estate to using buildings as an active data source. What that starts to be able to do is when you've got that in place, it supports hospital to community. Because, for example, if your facility is fully digital and it is all your systems are online, it starts to enable the ability to utilize the hospital without walls theory. So you can bring in the data sets from patients in their homes, for example. So it supports the ability to allow people to be cared for at home rather than just on the site. Productivity, I think, is an absolutely massive one. There's the 4% targets on productivity, but you could name any of the use cases that help productivity. If the building is helping you do your job better and helping you spend more time on doing your job than looking for things, or your patients are coming through quicker, or they're not getting lost because the wayfinding is helping them get to their place more, that's all really helping productivity. So it's an absolutely essential step. Net zero is around things like we can turn things off when people are not using it. So rather than scheduling or rather than set on a time base, it could be if there's someone in this room, if someone isn't in this room, I don't need to be, the ventilation doesn't need to be on. So it does support that energy reduction. And then not losing things obviously supports reduction of waste. So that's also towards net zero. On the patient safety side, so it's improved and customizable environments. You can envisage a future where a patient would turn into an inpatient ward and the conditions would be suitable for them because the system would know rather than just set to a standard environment. And then things like infection control and risk monitoring. And we'll talk a little bit more about water risk monitoring later on. And then workforce. So it's supporting effective working, as in people wanting to continue in their jobs because they feel like they can deliver it because they're not under so much strain because they've lost things or the building is not supporting them. And that really does start to plug the skills gap. I think I heard someone from the NHS mention a stat the other day that 49% of the NHS workforce will retire in 10 years. So the ability to replenish that with new people coming in and a different skill set around digital and that enabling them to do more is really, really important. So ultimately, the digital twins support all major NHS priorities. And then just to go on to how does that really benefit the NHS? So 5 different pillars. 5 pillars: administrative, energy, estates and facilities, staff, and future capital planning. I'll just briefly mention these, though you'll get taught through them through Neil and James's part. So administrative is a single log on, all your data in one place, ability to see historical records. Energy, I've talked about that, it's to be able to intelligently turn things off when you don't need them. E&F management might be around risk management, so automating water temperature records or shifting to predictive maintenance. Staff and patient experience, things like asset tracking that I've mentioned, smart wayfinding, or the staff wellbeing element, so being able to do your job under less pressure, the building is supporting you. And then finally, the future capital planning. So how are we actually using the spaces we've got? Do we really need to build something new, or can we use what we've got better? So then, rightly, one of the questions we got first asked is, so what's the return on investment on if I'm going to invest in digital twin, what is it? And this is just a generic example of the types of things that could fit if you were going to do an ROI case, but things on the left are tangible, so you can save energy through it. So 15 to 20% on that example, but depending on your building, it could be more. The predictive maintenance efficiency, so reducing the fact that things might break down by predicting them through sensors, has a cost saving to it. Asset management and loss reduction, so depending on what your equipment is, not losing it saves money. And then space utilization, so avoiding costs through having to do additional works. And the intangibles on the right are things around patient safety, the infection control element, productivity, faster bed turnaround, and well-being. And there's probably more in that bucket. But then also there is the cost of what is the cost of not doing it, the cost of inaction. So I guess from the predictive maintenance side is if something did go down, something wasn't picked up in your regular inspections and something stopped the department for a week, what is the cost of that compared to the cost of installing some sensors? So that's me done. And we're going to now talk about our use case with Royal United Hospital through James and Neil. So I'll hand over to James and Neil.
Thanks, Matt. Great to see you all, and thank you everybody for joining today. So my name is Neil Flint. I'm the Associate Director here at Bath Hospital. So with here, this is really kind of a partnership which has grown. It was built on the foundations of over a decade of development on site. So going from that traditional model of a main contractor, helping us develop our pathology suites, our pharmacy, our therapy suites, and then most recently the cancer centre in 2024. So this was something on the back end of all those developments. We've got a great partnership, and was just simply approached with the, would you be interested in? And I was fairly new into post myself at the time, and started to identify a lot of the things that Matt has already touched on around some of the inefficiencies, the demand on resource and workload. So coming together, building on that, it's separate from the capital build, it's separate from all of that development. This is just an initiative, but it complements it because we've got a main contractor who knows the site, knows the development, has a lot of the history of there to be able to work through where we're going. Just for a bit of wider context for colleagues who've joined who may not be familiar with the site, it's pretty much central in Bath, just off to the west, serves a population of over 500,000. We've got some acute trusts nearby, such as in Bristol and that as well. But we've got your traditional acute services from elective, our therapies, research departments. We've got our A&E, and we've got the cancer centre. It serves the whole of Bath and North East Somerset, along with West Wiltshire as well. And I think what will be probably most notable for all is the need to move to opportunities like this and explore the art of the possible is what we're all experiencing, which is growing demand. So particularly last year, we hit our first mark of over 100,000 A&E attendances. So the environment is being put under greater strain than what we've probably initially designed for, and where it's possibly going if we just stay as we are right now. So the opportunity to kind of look at what we understand, how we pull all information together to allow us to respond, develop where we can. But again, probably familiar to most, we've got a site which is aging. There are some great new departments, but there are some which are very tired, to say the least. So trying to use them all optimally to inform how care is delivered, but try and sustain things as best as we can within those finite resources is essential. And this is where the partnership with Kier has come into play. So for anybody who hasn't had the pleasure of coming to our wonderful state-of-the-art facility here in Bath, the Cancer Dyson Centre was facilitated through funding from the new hospitals build, generous donation by Dyson themselves to it. It serves over 2,200 patients per year, and that's only been going for a couple of years now as we started to explore earlier. It opened in September 2024, but the activity in there is quite significant. We're getting over 4,000 CT scans. We've got a linear accelerator, which has done over 12,000 radiation treatments a year already as well. We've got an inpatient unit of 22 beds. That's our William Budd ward. We've got a research hub with over 60 clinical trials operating at the moment as well. We've got our day case and our chemotherapy treatment, and we've got then kind of more traditional cancer-related services with our oncology, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, pharmacy, nuclear medicine. So quite an extensive build with a lot of services in it. And as I touched on in the previous slide as well, it's built on an aging estate. So what was there before was far more inferior, unable to meet the level of demand, and certainly not serve the population in the way that the new facility can as well. And as Matt touched on as well, it's about the national priorities that all of these will hopefully be familiar to many of you as well. But we have our alignment as a trust with national priorities, particularly the move to net zero by 2040. And everyone will have their green plans, hopefully, to kind of complement that. We've got a very much a challenge maintenance workforce, and it goes through the level of demand because of the deterioration of the site, the limited funding. Our backlog is increasing at quite a significant rate as well. The team to serve that, it's quite intensive to say the least at the moment. We have a fairly sizable workforce. It's all internal. We work with contractors where we have more specialist input required, but broadly we're as self-sufficient as we can be. But the nature of the site requires a lot of input and a lot of individual time, where certainly opportunities like this give us the ability to see where technology can aid that and try and reduce the burden on maintenance to allow them to focus more on, in the first instance, clearing some of that backlog and some of the emergency repairs before we then turn into more of a proactive mode, which starts to look at how we can anticipate and prevent things more in the future. As Matt also touched on as well, the wider workforce, we know having a great facility which feels great, is looked after, has what it needs when it needs to, aids not only our maintenance support service staff, but clinical frontline staff, being able to treat patients in the right environment, which feels better, the right temperature. It's a safe environment, is well looked after, well maintained. It aids patient care, but it also aids staff well-being. Hopefully, again, with a lot of trust in the area, we're all competing for the same staff to come and join us and try and retain them. So using our environment to the best and looking after it as best we can, certainly we believe will aid towards retaining that workforce. I think one key bit which we're touching on within this as well is our space utilisation. So we designed this great facility. We want to know how it's working in actuality. We know things naturally change, whether it's the demographic of patients at any one time, because you use historical data to kind of model where you anticipate it going forward, but being able to use some of that to see how it's being used and in real time and allow us to respond in a way which in the first instance allows us to, if a room was overheating, reduce that. Again, if the room's not being used, do we change its purpose? Do we allow it to be accessible to more people? To using that information to say, well, actually there are peak trends, peak approaches where we can then say, right, what are we going to do in the future with that? So we know that actually the demand in the summertime is different to winter. So we start to build the environment in preparation for some of those things. And most significantly, as I'm sure many will be joining me in, is the need for reporting. We have internal assurance we need to do, but we've got external regulatory requirements to do, complementing our HTM requirements to make sure that we operate in a safe environment, compliance with audits that come through and reporting to our safety committees, being able to demonstrate we're doing everything, have good quality data instead of things which are less reliant on individuals to go out and do, gives more confidence in it, but also our ability to hopefully address challenges before they become issues as well.
Great.
I'll hand it over to you now, James.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So yeah, we've been working on this project for quite some time now. So just to give you a bit of a feel for what our timelines looks like, we first started talking to the trust about this in July 2024, and there's some great interest in digital twins, and the trust was engaged. But we still have some work to do in terms of funding, etc., and business cases. But anyway, we did quite a wide level of engagement with the NHS, with NHS estates, with the trust themselves, and with representatives from the New Hospitals Programme to kind of tell them about what we wanted to do, but also get their inputs into the project as well. We went through a lot of compliance in terms of cybersecurity, both via key internal procedures and also by the trust themselves, to make sure that they were going to be comfortable with the way that we were securely handling data on the project. We passed all those checks, of course. And then I suppose there's a bit of a pause really whilst we waited for Neil to come into post in his new role, because we wanted to make sure we had the right governance and leadership in place before we proceeded at pace. We managed to get funding for the project late last year, and actually this project is funded by Kier themselves because we want to prove our capability with digital twins and also particularly in this sector. So we got that funding in place, and then work really began just before Christmas. So we started to configure the systems, get the data flowing, and now we're at a really good position. The system's configured. We're working very closely with Neil's team on some operational use cases to supplement the project, and we'll go into those in detail. But overall, project's in great shape. It's on program, and it's supported by a really engaged trust with great input from Neil's team, and including some input from some clinical staff, which is really great to get this project in a really good footing. Okay, so we work in a phased approach, and this is how we've worked on other digital twin pathfinders with other clients. It enables us to build up the data, build up the intelligence, and build up the insights and basically the digital twin capability as we go through the process. So we're currently funded for phase one, which will take us through to, I think, February next year. And as I say, things are going really well. But what's really key to the first phase is there's 2 milestone reports, and they'll make use of the data that we've got around how the building's performing and functioning and being used currently. And we'll make use of building physics and AI to create those reports, and they'll drive insights which will enable us to look at saving energy whilst maintaining thermal comfort and air quality, etc. So as I say, in parallel, we're looking at mobilizing those operational use cases, but hopefully we'll go on to future phases as well. So we won't end at phase one, we'll go into phase two and obviously into future phases. But, you know, part of our intention from the outset was to basically share our journey, which is part of what we're doing today, including successes and challenges to help inform, obviously, Royal United Hospitals, but other trusts as well, and the New Hospitals Programme as well.
So the way we've approached this collaboratively is facilitated by special interest groups. So as we kind of touched on, this isn't just something that Kier and IOH have worked together on. As Matt touched on and James did as well, there's a wider group around this which are paying particular attention to it and help facilitating it. So it's helping come from a position of influence from national policy, but all the key strategic national bodies around us. So from NHS England to our academic health science partners, sustainability managers, and NHS property services as well. So a lot of people around the sphere are looking at this and helping facilitate it. So again, anybody who's not familiar within your trusts around this, there will be people around the periphery who are already looking, working and trying to facilitate more of this across the place. Down to kind of within that nucleus is where how Kier are working with us on it. So from those wider groups, looking at components, looking at partners for some of the solutions that get introduced as part of this exercise and this opportunity, but then down to the actually us fundamentally working together to put it all in place and apply it and start to model it, start to see how it's going. To help us both collectively on that one, we've got it underpinned by a memorandum of understanding. So that does talk about some of the key bits around who owns the data. So more the transactional stuff between the two parties around how's it going to work, how long is it for, as James described, the phases approached. So what happens at each of those stages before you kind of move on to the next. So it's to protect both parties, but again, it's a nice legal document which for some people who may be concerned around or nervous around what it might mean for them, or are they locked into things, who keeps the technology, who keeps the data, all of those things are really fleshed out in that. So it isn't just a ad hoc kind of exercise, it's facilitated at a national scale, but locally we've kind of got that memorandum of understanding to help facilitate and monitor how we do it. So it's allowed us to kind of refine as well what we expect to get out of it for each other.
Okay, so a bit about current progress, and we're working very closely with Akuru on this project. Akuru are building technology specialists, including BMS, but they also have their own analytics platform called Two. So the first stage was for gear building technologists to visit site and install a JACE box onto the BMS. And that basically is a system that is able to harvest data from the BMS and then transmit it securely to the cloud. And in this case, it goes to the Acuries cloud, and they basically received the data, validated that information, and now presented it in the dashboards that you can see on the screen. So that you basically have two-factor authentication when you go onto the web application. You then get a GIS view, which means that you'll be able to see your various projects up and down the country. In this case, we only have one. You get also a RAG status on that project. In this case, it's green. You then get a basic model view of the project, and then you're into the dashboards, and we can see all of that live data coming in relating to meter and sub-meter information. We can see energy use by department. We can see data around CO2 and water temperatures, etc. And that's great. We can see all that live information, and Neil's team can see all that live information securely in a way they've not been able to see it before. However, it's not just about pretty bar charts, etc. It's about driving those insights. So that's where those milestone reports are really key. And we use a blend of AI and also building physics insights to be able to look at that data and understand it and see where we can actually drive the benefit. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting to our first milestone report in around 4 or 5 months' time now. Also, we can link in the BMS alerts, and then we can use rule-based technology to then look at how we can get those BMS alerts and then push those into work orders, which means that we can hopefully stop any downtime and prevent outages for Neil and his team on the Dyson building. So we've got a great baseline in place looking at energy management and environmental data, etc. And that's brilliant. But what we're really excited about now is that extension of the use cases, looking at those operational use cases to support Neil and his team in the operation of the Dyson building. And we're going to look at those in turn now. So starting with, I think it's going to be water monitoring. And I think if I can invite Neil to talk about the challenge, and I'll talk about the technical response to that challenge.
Yeah, thanks, James. And apologies, one thing I should have kind of just made a bit clear earlier on is, as you recognise from that site plan earlier, we've got a big site. We've focused in onto one facility as part of seeing what the art of the possible is with it. So some of the opportunities and examples we're about to give, we've kind of worked within the confines of the Dyson Centre as opposed to the whole site. But a lot of the principle that we talked about here was how this could be replicated and retrospectively fitted for more aging facilities around it as well. That's also quite significant to this particular to this particular aspect around water monitoring. So actually the Cancer Dyson Centre is in a really good condition. It's a new build. Things are flushed, utilised in a more considered way. A lot of our other aspects of the site have high risk as opposed to as many of us do around certainly things like Pseudomonas, Legionella testing. We know from, again, HTM compliance requires our water safety to be tip-top, monitored, responded to when there are any positive testings as well. And at the moment, it's very much on a response basis. So it's we try to instill routine flushing around areas, but I think the reality is, how confident can you be? It's very much reliant on individuals to go and do it. In some high-risk areas, we have auto flushers on things like showers, but again, there's limitations with them. What we have uncovered in some parts of the site is that you can somebody can just brush past, the sensor will go off, it will trigger the system to flush through for a little bit, but nowhere near the level that's required of kind of 2 to 5 minutes. That would be required as multiple times a day, constantly. So it means that sometimes we're missing those opportunities and they increase the risk more. So a lot of that is based on us, not having complete confidence on what is very much a manually relied on system. So the idea of starting to install monitoring that helps see the flow in both directions, hot and the cold, helps start to us to understand actually what the conditions of that environment are, what the level of risk is, and whether we need to consider things like more auto flushers. What else can we do around this to start saying how are those areas being used? For an area that might have a good amount of water flow and the temperature is working as it should do, means we're probably going to have to do a lot less, so we can reduce the resource that's required to monitor and maintain that. But once we start to kind of signal that an area is being used less, maybe a particular outlet's used less, we can start to test out whether it's do we need to put some more safety measures in that. It might even take us back to an analysis which sees us start to take it out. Equally, if we get faults, if we get blocks, if we get leaks, it will start to highlight the fact that there's been a drop in temperature, drop in pressure, all things which allow us to comply with water safety, but also support maintenance. And part of it is really then around being able to reduce the burden on the team and start to use some of this data, which we just don't have access to at the moment, again, without somebody manually going around and checking this.
Great, and just a bit on the technical response to that challenge is we were on site yesterday. We've identified 6 outlets. We've got these wave trend sensors which we can unintrusively install onto the pipe, and we will then be able to measure the water flow and the temperatures. And when we bring that data back to a dashboard, which means that Neil can focus on areas of risk rather than the routine inspections that they traditionally do. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on that one, but we're excited to roll that out next month. Okay, again, with space optimization, I'll invite Neil to sort of talk about through the challenge first, if I may.
Yeah, so with as with anywhere, we design a building. We use our health builder notes to inform the kind of type of environment it should be, what it's going to be designed for, but it's how is it used, and we naturally know that human habit later on or changes in service see some of that shift. We're quite fortunate at this position that the building's still fairly new, where pretty much all areas being used as we anticipated, but what we don't have is a real sense of kind of the wider implications of that. So we designed office spaces, consulting rooms. We need to know now as our site, again, probably familiar with many of you, demand for space is at a premium. We are landlocked around, so even if there was an ability and capital to invest in more space, it's not necessarily available in the way we'd want it. So we've really got to sweat our assets as much as we can, but do it in the right and comfortable way. So understanding anything from our waiting areas helps us understand the amount of people in. Again, it ties into the energy side of things around creating the safe and comfortable environment. If we're starting to see periodic times of more people coming in, we can start to adjust the temperature and the ambience to create that proper therapeutic environment to help patients experience. Equally for staff working those areas. Similarly with things like utilization of certain rooms, whether it's consulting rooms or office spaces, starts to influence anything from the energy saving and simple things like lights coming off, but also, again, temperature. And also, is that room being used as we designed it? And if we find that a new service or an expanding service needs a bit more space, can we share it differently? Love this hospital through and through, but naturally we do see some instances of people become territorial around environments. Sometimes it's hard to challenge that, and again, traditionally we've gone down routes of people walk around at certain times of the day and week and try and take numbers. Again, it's all circumstantial around those times. This helps give an evidence base to, are there spaces being used as designed? What else do we need to do to kind of optimize that? And how can we respond and use some of that data to support other services that might need that access to that space as well?
Great, thanks, Neil. And again, we were on site yesterday, and our technical responses, we've got 2 use cases broadly. First is we're going to look at the ward area on the ground floor. We've identified 6 entrance and exit points. We'll put people counters above the door there. They're anonymous. There's no issues with GDPR, and it means we'll be able to count people in and out and understand the amount of people using that area at any given time. The other use case was around the offices space on the first floor, and we've got a combination of technologies there. We're going to be using people counting in smaller rooms, and in the larger rooms we're going to be using desk counting sensors. These are all wireless. They're using the LoRaWAN system, so they're very easy to install and remove if we need to. But they'll give us a really good and rich data set, and we can start to correlate things like temperature and air quality, etc., and understand that even better in a more granular level, whilst at the same time providing Neil with that information about how the actual spaces are getting used and feature and influence future space optimization programs. Okay, I think it's going to come onto fire door compliance. So yeah, again, Neil, if you could set the scene.
Yeah, so fire safety, I think it's been quite hot in the press of late, excuse the pun there. It's particularly with instances around Southampton and certainly local for us in Weston-super-Mare. Not that there was anything around them, but it does signify the importance of fire compartmentation, having it strong, robust, to aid the safe evacuation and response of people on site as well as emergency services. What we particularly found across this hospital site is that compartmentation could be improved in areas, and it can come down to even fundamental things like, aside from more invasive looking into walls and cavities, but around the doors themselves, where they drop, where they're damaged and compromised, where they're not closing properly, or even down to ambience things where sometimes we might come across a door where a towel's been put over it just to stop the noise as it bangs, just to kind of help the patients. All understandable things, but they do present a risk, and the problem is that would come out at the wrong possible time. So again, some of the opportunities that were identified here was actually putting sensors around the doors that would help start to understand the level of closure. Again, it's all that, what is the risk to our fire compartmentation, which as a national requirement, along with a safety feature, we need to be kind of really cognizant of. And again, as part of our maintaining a health and safety bill as part of the the Building Safety Act, is to make sure that we have good compliance. So it's the sort of thing which, again, we were able to demonstrate when we have things like auditors and come around along with the fire authorities as well, to demonstrate what we're trying to do to learn and improve as much as we can, and start to target available funds when they're available. So again, things like capital investment, how we can start to use some of that to try and expand this where possible.
Great. And just a quick bit on the technical response. So we're working closely with SDS, who supplied the doors for the Dyson building. We're going to identify, well, we have identified a double door and a single door. We're going to replace those doors with doors which have inbuilt sensors, which will report on whether they're opened or closed, whether they've been damaged, whether they've been skewed, so they're off kilter, and ultimately with if any gaps have appeared which would compromise fire safety. So that, again, gives that automated live reporting back to Neil's team so that they can focus on the real issues rather than just routine maintenance activities. Okay, and then the last one, asset tracking.
Yeah, so this is one where we could have had a field day with it, speaking with our estates colleagues, but also with the clinical services as well. I'm sure, again, familiar to all will be things go missing. Things are never where you need them, and it does trigger things like buying more. Across the site, we looked at opportunities around things like beds, making sure we've got the right beds where we need them. So we explored some of those. Because of our focus on just the Dyson Centre, we were kind of working with the confines that what might come out of that area, we wouldn't be able to kind of monitor as part of this exercise, but it's kind of a future ambition. So for this, it was a case of what's pertinent to those services there. And we had really good engagement from the clinical team around things like stuff which aids patient care there and then. So ultrasound machines, bladder scanners, things like that, which we have an asset register at the moment, but I'm keen to call it an asset register that we record when something comes in, we tag it, we scan it. But tracking it is yeah, it's far from where it needs to be. This is where that starts to aid it. So again, working with James and the team to understand what that might look like in terms of having things like sensors around. How are we going to track them. I suppose it's similar to the Milton Keynes example that was given earlier as well. There's different approaches to it. So we're kind of working on this initiative to say, actually, for that type of equipment in this environment, we want to make sure that we know where something is. So we don't have an abundance of things to be in every room and fully equipped. We're working within finite resources. But if a patient needs something, it's easy to obtain without people spending hours hunting around. It will frustrate the staff member, it will upset the patient, their experience, it starts to hinder their care and their confidence in us as well. So it has so many factors to it that we felt that focusing on some of the clinical equipment to start off with is where we're going to go. So yeah, it's really just around that principle of being able to better track some key pieces of equipment to make sure that when it's needed, we're easily able to identify it and bring it to the right location.
Thanks, Neil. This one is a bit more of a technical challenge because it requires a building-wide network to be able to triangulate and locate bits of equipment. But we probably struck on a bit of luck yesterday because we noticed the Wi-Fi access points that are installed at the Dyson do have beaconing capability. So we're going to look and see if we can get that turned on to support this asset tracking piece, and then work with Neil's team to look at those bits of kit that we want to track. And we've got a list of a wish list from Neil's team, and we'll hopefully make that happen as well. Okay, and you know, we're obviously looking at the Dyson building. It's a fairly new building. We've got that great information model that we've handed over to the client. We've got all new building technology within that building that we can tap into. So we've got a great starting point for a digital twin project. But elsewhere in the estate, that's probably not the case. I'm sure Neil would agree. And we've got an example about how we can create digital twins of buildings which are more legacy buildings. So this example is something that we worked on in the custodial sector. We've got a building, I think it's from the 90s, it's sort of low intelligence, there's very poor records. So how we created a digital twin? So we sent someone round to scan the building using a wearable scanner. That creates a point cloud. Then we create quite a basic model, which gives us some feel for the spaces and some of the key plant as well. We host that model in a digital twin platform, and at the same time we upgrade the technology in the building, so we're enabled to get data feeds from the building out to the cloud for building analytics. So we've got an approach which works for legacy buildings as well. And via this approach, we've basically been able to digitize an analog building. But it's been really great. And on that particular project, through our phased approach and our reports, we came up with 5 key things that the prison, in this case, needed to do to upgrade that building to make it turn from non-functional into a functional building. And that could have serious impacts on life cycle. So yeah, just wanted to cover that example to say it's not necessarily all about new buildings. We can tackle the legacy estate as well.
Sorry, Matt, you're on mute, sir.
Sorry, that was me there messing around with the technology. I'll take the slides off and summarize. So yeah, the future looks like embedding this in from the start. So a lot of what we're talking about is retrospective, adding things on after it's been done. But technology's moved on a lot in the last few years. And actually, there's no reason this couldn't be part of a construction project now. So building the sensors, building the door sensors as talked about, this should be business as usual now for the benefits the NHS gets. We'd really like to see that as part of the brief and part of the spec for all projects. And really, what we need to do to achieve that is to measure the benefits. So a lot of what Neil and James are doing and trying to talk about is demonstrating those benefits. It's all very well with the technology, but what is that giving to the NHS? And that's very much what we're doing at the moment. And then the layering of data, I just think gets more and more interesting as you go on. And I think, Neil, you mentioned about A&E and about the number of people in A&E. I think with A&E wait times going up and with the pressure in that space, unfortunately, what we also see is increased incidents in A&Es because of the pressure on people and the amount of people in there. So the layering of data example in that could be once you've got lots of data collectively together through the twin on incident rates, on temperature, on waiting time, on number of people, space in the waiting room, you can see a place where you can layer up all of that and start to predict when we get into a tipping point in terms of people and incident rates. So there's things across NHS, I'm sure there's all different examples of where you've got the data, you can start to prevent and predict things for the better. So lots of content there, and I'm conscious we've probably gone a little bit over what we thought we would, but I wanted to make sure everyone could hear about that. So there is one final poll we'd like to ask, and if you mind launching that, and then I will summarise. Hopefully I have a couple of minutes for Q&A. So we're just conscious there's a broad audience here. We'd just be really interested if anyone is sort of utilising or has any of these types of systems already. And I think what we're particularly looking for is in the NHS where this has already been used. I think it's fair to say some of the examples that James and Neil went through, maybe in isolation, are happening already. And it's about bringing this together. I think how does this platform bring this together in a place that people can utilise it. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind filling that in, then while you're having a go at that, I'll summarise. So what we've talked about today is the definition of digital twin. Hopefully it's a little bit clearer for you now. I describe it more as a mirror and its data overlooks. In terms of interoperability, data is the NHS's really important fundamental, and it's about bringing it together in an intelligent way. Scalability is at the core of all this. The need to be able to build this up over time and grow it is incredibly important. So when the creation of these are started, they need to have scalability as a fundamental principle. And I think the opportunity is almost endless. I talked about almost every different policy it touches, and digital could touch any package or any part of the NHS. So it really is about understanding where your challenges are first. Understanding where your challenges are first and focusing on those first. And return on investment, we talked about both tangible return on investment and intangible. Really, I would encourage having a look through those as part of building the business case, because on the surface it might look like it's just energy, for example, but you can see there's so much more to it. And then how I talked about how it aligns with key policy areas. So we covered all the key policy areas of supporting it: estates and facilities, staff and patient experience. And then hopefully it was useful for you to hear the progress at RUH. So thank you to Neil and James for taking us through that. And that's the start, very much the start of that journey, and the one we hope to see very many benefits out of. And really, the last piece from me is this is the future. This is the way that all of the NHS estate will have to move to meet the productivity challenges, to meet workforce, and to meet net zero. So it really is about how we can all support and learn from each other to get to there quicker. So with that, we may only have a few minutes, but I think it's for Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Thank you for that. Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes for a couple of questions, I think. So our first question, how will RUH retain ownership and control of data, avoid platform lock-in, and meet NHS cyber requirements and interoperability standards?
Oh, let's start off with an easy one, shall we? I'll ask James to go through kind of the technical side of it, but that's really what we identified as part of the Memorandum of Understanding, is to identify exactly that. So the good thing is that all the sources of information are ours already. So it's not that we've got to go and get something from someone else. It's already there. It's in our building management system. It's all there. Anything which comes out of the data dashboards are what also get shared with us as well. So we've got access to it all already. It's just about as we navigate through this, there are particular points. So as we get to each phase, there is an ability just to kind of separate. We retain our ownership of the bits and our data, and it's quite nice and it protects all parties for that. In terms of things like the data governance. We're all familiar with GDPR and all that. That's quite heavily tested. Nearly all of us, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that nearly every trust in the country, we've been working with it long enough that people from IT and information governance know all the networks requirements, the legal obligations around that, which is why, again, part of getting to this stage was making sure everybody's had the right input to feel safe to proceed. And again, that's for both parties, because again, it's to support Kier in their build-up of this, but also for us to make sure that, yeah, we retain the key information, which is sensitive and reliable.
And I'll just frame that in a quite a simple way. Should the project conclude in February next year, we hope it doesn't, but if it does, the trust can have access to all the raw data that we've used to run the system. They can then use that data to perhaps spin up another system, and then also get, of course, access to all of the reports that we produced along the way. So, yeah, the data is very much the trust's. We're just custodians of it.
Perfect. Somebody asks, are you using GIS technology for anything?
I can take that, Neil, if you'd like. Okay, cool. So yeah, you would have seen the GIS view very briefly as we looked at the Accuro platform. It's got the capability to look at multiple projects, multiple buildings across the country or globally. But I think GIS technology will become key as estates start to look at digital twins across their whole estate. So I think you would go down from a GIS view, which would give you some broad information about buildings and services, etc., and then go down to more detailed digital twins to look at the buildings themselves. So I think it's very much part of the future, but we're only just really tickling that part of it at this point. And I include that reference to Accuro at the moment.
Thank you. How will the digital twin integrate with BMS, metering, CAFM, and other hospital systems? And will users get single sign-on and a single source of truth?
Yeah, well, okay, I think we're already very much integrated with the building management system. We talked about installing that harvesting box, which securely takes data to the cloud, which we're analysing now. We've got the BMS alerts within the system at the moment, and now it's about how we set up rules to take certain alerts to raise work orders in the CAFM system. So the CAFM system is the system which Neil's team used to manage all the work orders and the planned planned maintenance activities at the Dyson. We can now automate some of the alerts to then raise work tickets in that system, which will then help move into more of a predictive maintenance mode. So something we're working on. Yeah, but the answer is yes. Of course, we want people to use that two-factor authentication to log onto the system to be able to get all the data that they need to related to the Dyson through that system as we move forwards and gain that capability and functionality through the different phased approach, or the phased approach.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, I think we've got time for a couple more. Are these dashboards custom built specifically for this project or trust, or is the intention that they become a standardized solution that could be rolled out across other projects or clients?
Okay, so these are the dashboards that we have at the moment are very much out of the box dashboards, which are available through the Accuro system, but we can tailor those to suit different requirements. At the moment, we're feeling our way with the trust to see how that data wants to be represented. I think we've done a really good first pass at that. We're going to have a review at that. I'm starting that review tomorrow to see how we can drive better insights from that data. But we do want a standard set of KPIs to report against, and I think that would be a great standardized approach we could get. If we could get that across the NHS, then that ability to be able to, and that vision where you'd be able to sit in Whitehall and get an understanding of all hospitals' statuses at any given time, that becomes a reality. So yeah, I think more standardized approaches as we go forwards would be fantastic.
And just to add to that, we're
yeah.
pretty much all asked the same things. We know what we have to legally comply with. So you might have subtle differences around things on site, but the broader bits around stuff like compliance and that will be very much typical for all. So I think it's a good starting point, and it might just be more subtle bits that each people think, oh, it would be good to know. But I think the broader suite that we've got in place at the moment, certainly it would be easily replicable.
Thank you. How will the RUH Digital Twin Pathfinder influence and inform the new hospital programme? And what lessons or evidence will be transferable to future NHP schemes?
I'll take that one, I think. So yeah, so James mentioned in the initial presentation that we had some engagement with NHP quite a while ago now. It's been something there was soft market engagement for the new hospital program for a while, where they were talking to the market to make sure that everyone was understanding. So we had some understanding of where that would be going. And then, of course, it went into a procurement process, so we didn't speak to them throughout that period. Now we are successfully in the new hospital program, so that's been launched, and the mobilisation is happening at the moment with our teams. And yeah, we would welcome anyone who would like to come and see how this is going with RUH to cross over and have a look at it. The intention is very much not just for NHP, for the whole NHS to see this and to see which bits they might want to use for their trust, or which bits might not be suitable, and just to use it as a test bed as well as bringing the benefits. So yeah, we're in the NHP. We build for the NHS, so we hope to be that bridge for the lessons.
And just at a site level, as we kind of touched on a few times in it, we're starting off within kind of a part of the hospital. But some of the model for this is for a site like mine, where confidence around any more for us out of the new estates hospital program is probably a bit too far away. So it's how can we use this to either inform retrospective fitting or just a new build standard. So any new developments to a ward or a place on site or a larger facility on site, we'll start building it into kind of those specifications going forward and build up over time. It's going to depend on what resources we have available to us, but it doesn't have to just rely on kind of those national programs to facilitate it.
Thank you. Somebody else asks, if the FM was mainly outsourced, so the facilities management, and the provider had its own systems, how might you align the data, security, and interventions?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we're working with our own facilities management team, Gear Places, to look at the running of a hospital. So we've got a bit of understanding around that. We also work in other sectors whereby there's a private operator actually operating the facility, but we're working on behalf of the client. So we can work around various different systems, and really it's about working through what are the key data exchanges that we need to look at. And how we actually set up those links between those systems. So looking at things like API technology, etc., to create a kind of cohesive system of systems which enables the digital twin. So you need to be flexible, I suppose, is the key point. And you know, technology these days gives you the advantage that you can be flexible.
Sure. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt. I can see there's quite a few questions coming in, so I think we're very happy to take those away, and we will respond to them individually to people. So there's some really great questions on there. Conscious we've gone over a little bit, so we're happy to come back to people afterwards if that's all right.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan to me. Let's have one more question and one final question. Do you have any advice for other NHS trusts or organisations who are just beginning their digital twin journey? And what should they be thinking about from day one?
So from my perspective, I came in at a fortunate position that James, Matt and the team had already engaged with site, but what became apparent very clear was the fact that as a site, we didn't necessarily know what we needed. So working with a partner who has a good understanding, but equally the opportunities, the discussions we've had, particularly over the last few weeks, and particularly yesterday with a site visit, really find what would be right for our environment. So I think it's just constantly that you need good engagement. I've got a fantastic team here how they've warmed to this, considering they are constrained by time. They've got so many other jobs on, reacting to site pressures, but really excited about the art of the possible here. So I think having a contractor who's willing to work with you, who's familiar with the art of the possible, but willing to explore as well, and see how it can tailor to your site is absolutely the right thing. For me as well, having that good MOU, that good understanding to start off with, that we may want to do more, but we may be constrained by money in the future, which means we can't quite go that next step. Having clear outlines and set out from an early stage around those expectations through the MOU has helped kind of facilitate that contractually. But not being scared as well, it would be very easy for me to talk about how complex this site is, how the different aging, different equipment, we've got different BMSs, we've got different stores, different CAFMs, not different CAFMs, but different approaches to absolutely everything in so many parts of the building. It'd be very easy for us to not. I think having just a really good set of individuals to work with through from Kier, which help kind of just highlight the art of the possible here, has opened the doors, and it's made it easier for us to interact and get that engagement from clinical services as well. And that's just it. It's going to be the basics of organizational change, just really good engagement, really good understanding, and the right people around the table has definitely helped move this on probably quicker than otherwise I think it might have done.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll finish there, I think, if that's okay. So yeah, that's been great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, James. And thanks, of course, to everyone that's joined us today. And yeah, that's been great. Thank you, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.